Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is courageous generosity. It's been said that generosity is the highest expression of courage. And I think we get to explore that today and what it looks like to live out of generosity. So should be an interesting conversation. And before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop. And allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome to you and everybody else who's joining us today, this Friday, another closing of another week. And they do seem to fly by, don't they? So today we're talking about courageous generosity. And I'm still exploring this understanding, this notion, but it's come up in multiple places lately that generosity is the highest expression of courage. And why would that be? Why would that be? To step outside of ourselves and the limitations or the notion of scarcity that we might have around our own needs. It means stepping out of fear to be able to be giving to another generously, means stepping out of the fear of not enough, right? Not enough time or not enough resources, and to be giving generously means expanding ourselves into a connection that could potentially be that could potentially jeopardize ourselves. You know, maybe we get to look at what the nature of true generosity is. I looked up the definition this morning, and it didn't. There wasn't anything particularly revelatory about it, but I'm gonna look it up again, and we can explore the definition together. Let's see. So generosity, readiness or liberality in giving. But I think this one probably is even more relevant. Freedom from meanness or smallness of mind or character, largeness or fullness, amplitude. So as we think into this notion of generosity and lack of meanness or smallness, or freedom from meanness or smallness of character. What's coming to mind in this inquiry into generosity is the question, what would love do? And that's such a powerful, powerful question to move from. Maybe I should have titled this, What Would Love Do? But it's from that space of love and open-heartedness. Maybe the generosity comes from the willingness to be vulnerable, the willingness to be connected. Because in that connection, there's an opening and an experience of potential pain or disruption or loss of oneself, not in a bad way, like maybe in the best way, but it still can be terrifying to people. You know, the transcendence of self-interest, or transcendence of the primacy of self-interest, to be able to give generously. And it doesn't mean necessarily monetarily, or we can be looking at giving in terms of time, in terms of grace or understanding. So another thing that's coming to mind is a conversation that I had with a client about a big political upheaval that their community is undergoing, and all the disruption around it, and how the inclination is to fight, you know, like to engage in a battle of wills and mind, and domination and control, you know, power, domination and control, and trying to overcome the opponent, the whole opponent idea. And I think it's a huge act of generosity and courage to step into a conversation in a circumstance like that. We all have circumstances in our lives, to ask, what would love do? And how can we resolve this generously? How can we find a place of connection and union or unity that is outside of and beyond the normal, and I say normal in big quotes, but the knee-jerk response of quashing the enemy, so to speak. You know, what kind of generosity does it take to be looking instead at reunion, or unification, or looking at the bigger picture of community, perhaps. So last night on Sustainability Now, we aired a conversation with a man named Four Arrows. That's sort of the Anglos' the conversion to English of his name. And he shared a chart of our more conventional Western beliefs or principles versus indigenous principles. And one of those that really stands out to me is when there are social transgressions. What do? We put somebody in jail. We have a punitive system. Whereas in indigenous culture, the intention is to serve community. And so rather than, and I had a conversation on Wednesday about this as well, which is rather than putting someone who has perpetrated something, a crime, rather than directly necessarily putting them in jail, what the inclination is to look at what would that punishment, in what ways would that punishment impact the larger community? So if this person has a family, taking them away from the family, what impact would that have on the family? And then consequently, what impact would that have on the larger community? And so the thing that is being done there is there's a generosity of spirit that's looking at the larger picture. And there's a courage in trusting the universe, trusting life in being generous to another, right? So if I have one piece of bread and I'm with someone who has none, there's an act of generosity and courage in sharing that piece of bread with another, and a deep faith in life that I'm going to be okay, that I'm not signing my death warrant by helping another. And I wonder, it's that question is really making me wonder about the distinction, if there is one, between that kind of courage and faith. Maybe that courage comes from faith in something larger, faith and trust of life. And we talk a lot about being a vehicle for the expression of life. And in the expression of the courage of generosity, true generosity of heart and spirit, we come closer to to an experience of love, an experience of our unboundedness. And it's interesting in the work that I do with people, how so often there's a fear around stepping into the more that we can be, stepping into our bigger selves. There's a fear even of letting go of limitations and ideas about who we are, because we don't know who will be on the other side. And so there's this deep leap of faith in expressing generosity to others. So generosity is like having no strings attached. It's not I'm giving to get, or I'm giving because. It's I'm giving out of this generosity. So Rosalind says faith, a belief compared to courage. Yeah, I don't know if they are unrelated. I don't know if they're necessarily inseparable. I looked up the definition for courage too, and it said, being able to move forward without fear, but that's not my understanding of courage. My understanding of courage is to move forward despite the fear. It's interesting. I made a commitment to myself to make a large donation over time to an organization. And this is like a commitment beyond ableness, we can say, that it's an unreasonable commitment that I made, not bounded by my attachment to any to my limitations around notions of money and practical money management and my welfare, and not to my direct detriment, but way beyond anything that I would have comfortably undertaken in the past. And it means, for me, the experience of it has been stepping beyond a certain degree of fear or a certain experience of or thought about scarcity, really scarcity and lack, and recognizing that how much that drives me without even realizing it, to be confronted by stepping beyond the limitations that I didn't even know I'd imposed on myself, right? To step into this larger commitment of generosity, and to notice the anxiety that I have experienced when I'm facing it, to notice the resistance that I have to overcome in order to follow through with that act of generosity. And so I think where the courage comes, and the faith, I think, is based in belief, perhaps, that there's a higher power, or that there's a higher calling, or that life is happening for us, for instance. That's a belief and a faith that can give courage. Anyway, my experience is that it means me stepping into an unknown, and stepping into the unknown willfully is an act of courage, because we don't know what's going to happen, so there, on some level, there's trust, so courage isn't moving ahead without fear. It's moving ahead in the face of fear, even though there's fear. And there's something exhilarating and enlivening about stepping into that place of faith and trust and right action. And when I say right action, I don't mean like somebody else's dictates of right or wrong, when I say right action, what I mean is stepping into the action that is resonant with your essential being, stepping into action that is right from your core, that is right in your heart, not like a righteous rightness, but a resonant rightness, and beyond rationality, beyond the stories of why not, beyond the stories that will enable us to stop into the space of one's calling, into the space of service to one's essence, the ways that we can disrupt our complacency by moving into this courageous space of generosity. So when we're angry at someone, when we feel hurt, when we feel betrayed, there's perhaps an act of generosity that is to enable us to experience the humanity of the other, perhaps. And it might dictate our behavior in a different way. It might call us to moderate our response. It might call us to find new pathways that didn't previously exist, by even a willingness to consider different alternatives. That in itself can be an act of generosity, because it challenges our existing way of being. When we see a wrong that needs to be righted, we want to charge forward and right that wrong. And that impulse is also often one that is driven by a presumption or the assumption of separation and opposition and enmity. And we get to maybe look at ways to recreate ourselves such that new possibilities of resolution emerge. We live in a paradigm of opposition, polarities, contrasts. And when situations arise that are polarized, it's an act of generosity to find a way to step above that polarizing issue, to zoom out, so to speak, and see what might be possible from a larger lens. It means releasing our attachment to being right. It means releasing our attachment to notions of how we think we are, or we think we should be, or we think a situation should be. It means stepping into a different space. So I love this. Rosalind says ways to do this: sitting in a different space, literally. And that's brilliant. It's brilliant. So here I am in my fixed attitude, in my fixed perspective. And how can I get a new perspective? Literally, new perspective. I can physically move myself into a different space. So thank you for that, Rosalind. That's a great insight. That we can also bring ourselves into motion. If we're seated, we can start moving around. If we're moving around, perhaps we can seat ourselves to or do something that shifts the energy, shifts the perspective, and to ask ourselves, rather than engaging in an adversarial kind of conflict, opposition, step back and look at, well, what is really going on here, and what is the opportunity? This is something we talk about a lot, is bringing forth the opportunity. What is the opportunity that was heretofore invisible? That too takes an act of generosity, an act of courage, to be able to step out of one's knowing, one's limited purview, one's often passionate and impassioned response, to be exploring the unknown. So why is generosity an act of courage? It is stepping into the unknown. It is challenging our notion of our limited self. And for that reason, generosity is a gift that gives. I saw this wonderful couple videos on TikTok. I have a little bit of a TikTok obsession. There's some remarkable things that I've been exposed to on TikTok, just really beautiful. But anyway, I guess there's this dad who's a very, very wealthy guy, and he's got a 7-year-old son that he has going and giving people gifts, giving people gifts of money, or paying someone's rent, or just gifts of generosity and altruism. And he's filming these things and teaching his son how to be a generous member, a 7-year-old. It's remarkable, of society, to be experiencing the power of generosity. And it's just magnificent, and a privilege to witness these encounters. So sit with this notion of generosity, and generosity to self too. Like, rather than judging yourself for the things that you do or say, or berating yourself for not being enough, or doing something wrong, find some generosity for yourself. And with that, we're going to call it a morning. So the encouragement to be generous, not only to others, but to yourself. And I don't mean through material things necessarily. I mean generosity of spirit particularly. So that's it for this morning. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. And as always, it's a pleasure and a privilege to be spending this time together and exploring ways of being, ways of thinking, ways of connecting. So until next time.